Hey guys, I think we're gonna start now-ish. Thanks everyone for coming out for this.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Is yours on?
What?
Is yours on?
I think so.
You get to press the power.
Yeah, this is amazing. A lot of like resentful people, I guess, in the city.
My name is Matthew Shen Goodman. I'm a senior editor at Triple Canopy.
And I'm Emily Wong. I'm also a senior editor here.
And Triple Canopy is a magazine. We're based here. You're in our office right now. Since 2007, we've advanced a publishing model that encompasses digital works of art and literature, books, exhibitions, and public conversations and events like the one you're attending tonight. Our issues are all, right now they're all themed, and currently we're celebrating the launch of Resentment, which is an exploration of resentment and where it can lead us, if not toward exhaustion. This issue is devoted to reclaiming resentment, especially as harbored by those who are used to fits of anger and bitterness being called unproductive, petty, selfish, even pathological. We ask, who has a right to be resentful? What are the possibilities and limitations of resentment as a basis for thought and expression, intimacy and solidarity? How does resentment channel or erode our attention and energy? How is resentment stoked, mobilized, policed, and to what ends? Can and must resentment be useful?
In the spirit of the issue, we wanted to do a little show and tell tonight with some people we admire. Everyone tonight will be sharing a work of literature, art, song, film, whose resentfulness is like what we find to be pleasurable, validating, infectious, even hopeful. So Matt and I will start off by sharing like a resentful object that has been important to each of us personally, and then we'll be introducing each of the participants individually as they come up. But also just to say that we're really happy to be joined tonight by Rahel Aima, Wo Chan, Marwa Halal, Devin Kenny, Jennifer Krasinski, and Sarah Resnick. Okay, so Matt's gonna go first.
Is that good, Spencer? No? So I'm going to read from Renata Adler's The Perils of Pauline, which was later retitled House Critic. It was first published in NYRB in 1980. It's a kind of a savaging of the film critic Pauline Kael. I used to work a kind of 10 to 6 art critic / editor job, and I don't think I've ever resented something so much in my life, and so reading this really resonated, and actually was one of the things that led me to and something I brought forth when we were kind of working on this issue. So I'm going to read bits of that and then some of the responses and then her response to the response. The job of the regular daily, weekly, or even monthly critic resembles the work of the serious intermittent critic who writes only when he's asked to or genuinely moved to, in limited ways and only for a limited period of time. Occasionally, a particularly rich period in one of the arts coincides with a prolific time in the life of a major critic, or a major critic, Edmund Wilson, Harold Rosenberg, takes over a weekly column and uses it at the occasion for an essay. After a time, however, even Edmund Wilson no longer wrote frequently and regularly about books. He also wrote all his life on other subjects. Harold Rosenberg wrote continuously on subjects other than painting. Normally, no art can support for long the play of a major intelligence, working flat out on a quotidian basis. No serious critic can devote himself frequently, exclusively, and indefinitely to reviewing works, most of which inevitably cannot bear, would even be misrepresented by, review in depth. At most publications, staff critics are cast up from elsewhere in the journalistic ranks. The copy desk, for instance, or regular reporting. What they provide is a necessary consumer service, which consists essentially of three parts: a notice that the work exists and where it can be bought, found, or attended, a set of adjectives appearing to set forth an opinion of some sort, but amounting really to a yes vote or a no vote, and a somewhat non-judgmental, factual description or account, which is usually inferior by any journalistic standard to reporting in all other sections of the paper. On the basis of these columns, the reader gets his information and, if he is an art consumer, forms his own judgment and makes his choice. Serious publications, however, tend from time to hire talented people, educated, usually young, devoted to the craft of criticism, at least as it entails fidelity to an art and to a text under review. What usually happens is that such a critic writes for some time at his highest level, reporting and characterizing accurately, incorporating in whatever is judgmental evidence for what he's saying, and producing insights and illusions which, if they're not downright brilliant, are apposite. What happens after a longer time is that he settles down. The consumer service remains the professional basis for the staff reviewer's job. Fidelity, evidence, and so forth are still the measures of his value, but the high critical edge becomes misplaced, disproportionate when applied to most ordinary work. The staff critic is nonetheless obliged and paid to do more than simply mark time between rich periods and occasional masterpieces. The simple truth: this is okay, this is not okay, this is vile, this resembles that, this is good indeed, this is unspeakable, is not a day's work for a thinking adult. Some critics go shrill, others go stale. A lot goes simultaneously shrill and stale. A few critics, writing quietly and well, bring something extra into their work. Arlene Crochet, a fine ability to describe. John Russell, a piece of education in art history. Hilton Kramer, something in the realm of ideal. Sorry, that was... A few others bring a consistent personal voice, a sort of chat whose underlying proposition is, this is what happened in my field today. Here's what I have to say about it. Draw what conclusions you will, on the basis of your familiarity by now with my style, my quality of mind, and the range of my association, in short with who I am. Some critics quit and choose to work flat out again on other interests and in intermittent pieces. By far the most common tendency, however, is to stay put and simply to inflate. To pretend that each day's text is after all a crisis, the most, first, best, worst, finest, meanest, deepest, etc., to take on, since we are dealing in superlatives, one of the first, most unmistakable marks of the hack. So Adler then kind of goes on to pillory Cale for being a hack. It's on the occasion of the collection When the Lights Go Down that the famous quote is, line by line, without interruption, worthless. And there's just one piece on rhetorical questions. It's very good, so I'm going to read that. Another such instrument, this is Adler on Cale again. Another such instrument is the mock rhetorical question, the little meditation with the question mark. In this book, there are literally thousands of them, not just of the jokey marshmallow sort above, but of every sort, in tirades and fusillades, in and outside parentheses, an apparently limitless capacity to inquire. And these are quotes. Is it just the pompadour, or is he wearing a false nose? How can the novelist have pain in his bowels when Providence has no bowels? Have you ever bought a statue of a pissing Cupid? Why are we getting these union speeches now? Were the outsiders directing the strike? Were the pros working out strategy? Have we been conned? Have the people become so accustomed? Shouldn't the movie be about why he imagines what he does? Who is this hitchhiker on the road of life? Allied artists and Bantam books, why are you doing this? Why then does it offend me when I think about it? Where was the director? Does the cavalry return? Who, him? But oh God, why isn't it better? Why isn't there the daring and exaltation that our senses fairly cry out for? And so on. It is difficult to convey the effect of hundreds of pages of these questions, those which have answers, yes, no, what, I don't know, sweetie, you're the one who saw the movie. Badger the reader, who is courteously inclined to think when addressed with question marks, into a mindless, degrading travesty of a dialectic. Others are coy, convoluted displays of erudition. Miss Cale wants us to know, for instance, that she knows that René is related to Malraux, and that Malraux is dead. Also that she knows the first name of Bertolucci's father. Others still addressed, like script margin annotations, the film itself are proprietary, prescriptive. Miss Cale, having lost any notion of where the critic sits, wants to imply that she was at the story conference. The film is somehow hers. And others still, in particular the outcries, to God and allied artists and Bantam books, are meant to demonstrate that she cares more than anybody. It is overwhelmingly clear, however, from the reviews in this book, that one thing Miss Cale has ceased to care about is films. And so then I'm just going to read one letter in the NYRB that came afterwards. To the editors, I am writing to protest in the strongest possible terms your decision to publish Renata Adler's depressing, vengeful, ceaseless tirade against that brilliant critic Pauline Kael. Adler's criticism in The New Yorker was mediocre, mushy. How dare she lash out at Kael for using masturbatory slang and we or you for I? Can't the little viper see the beauty, poetry, hilarity, and straightforwardness in Kael's critiques? Oops, I'm using Kaeline rhetorical questions. What a crime, you think I or she killed Kennedy or something? Or, while RA's at contradictions, she berates Kael for demanding punishment and crying guilt of her unfavored movie folk, while she herself acts as if Kael knifed Gary Coleman. Oops, I used a violent and sadistic metaphor. Okay, heat up the electric chair. So, line for line, when the lights go down is worthless, huh? What about the titles of her critiques of Seven Beauties and Carrie? I cracked up just reading them. And about her punchy opening and closing lines, especially her closing line of her critique of Satyajit Ray's Distant Thunder. Adler's review is bathed in bitterness. The final irony is that about half as many people will read Perils of Pauline as will read Master Spy, Master Seducer by Pauline Kael. Please print this. Matthew Wilder, a loyal P. Kael fan, age 13, Des Plaines, Illinois. And just very finally, to which Adler responded, I intend someday to write a piece about letters and letters columns, not, however, these. There is just not much in them. With any luck, Mr. Wilder is not really 13. Thanks. Okay, so we're gonna, sorry about that impromptu Googling. We're gonna play this, and this is Emily's selected clip, so if everyone could watch.
Hello, salespeople. Yep. Meatball hero, eggplant parmesan. You got it. Yeah, we deliver. Of course we deliver. All right. Where's that? 1, 2, 3.
You're going to pay now, you're going to pay on layaway.
Yeah, we know where that is.
How much?
Been here 30 years.
You've been coming in here at least 3 times a day. What are you, a retard? It's $1.50. Yo, stop, put some cheese in that motherfucker, man. Extra cheese is $2. $2? Yeah, $2.
Hey, you can forget that shit.
Yeah. Damn, son, you cheap, man.
Please stop up. I spelled it in the air. Right. And you called him a bum? I don't think he was a bum. He just wasn't right for me. He wasn't passionate. I need passion in my life. That's what I would say.
He's a Mama Luke.
He's a Mama Luke? Yeah, right.
Yo, Mook.
A couple of words of Thai working.
Okay. So you know I'm still
What?
Come here, the brothers up on the wall.
Man, ask Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, how come you got the brothers up on the wall here?
You want brothers on the wall? Get your own place. You can do what you want to do. You can put your brothers and uncles and nieces and nephews, your stepfather, stepmother, whoever you want. See? But this is my pizzeria. American Italians on the wall only.
Take it easy,
And you, hey, don't stop with me today.
What? Yeah, that might be fine, Sal, but you own this. Rarely do I see any American Italians eating in here. All I see is black folks. So since we spend much money here, we do have some say.
You looking for trouble?
Are you a troublemaker? Is that what you are?
You making trouble?
Yeah, I'm a troublemaker. I'm making trouble.
You're a real ball breaker. You're always coming in here looking for trouble, huh? Suppose I busted your head. How would you...
Mookie, you want to get your friend out of here?
Well, you gonna kick me out now? Or you gonna kick me out, huh?
No, I'm not kicking you out. You're kicking yourself out.
What? Look, we got some brothers up on the wall, you know? Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, you know, Michael Jordan, tomorrow.
Come on, Mookie, get him out, all right?
I'm trying to get him out.
Yeah, I paid for it.
I know you paid for it. Let's go.
Yeah, all right. So you're kicking me out. Gonna beat me in the head. You're gonna kick me out, right?
Come on, let's
yeah,
go.
okay, bet. Yeah, all right.
Let's go.
Look, I paid for my, look, boycott Styles.
Go.
Yo, boycott Styles.
I got your boycott swinging.
Boycott Styles. Yo, man, what you laughing at? I paid for my slice, man. Yo, man, come on, I spent much money in there.
What are you trying to do?
What am I trying to do?
What are you trying to do?
So that was Do the Right Thing, directed by Spike Lee. The first time I ever watched Do the Right Thing, I was in a room full of white male philosophers, and it was movie night in the philosophy department at this fancy university, and I happened to be there because at the time I was in this kind of terrible relationship that I resented with one of those philosophers, and so I was already kind of like what am I doing here? But the guy who picked the movie for movie night was this guy who had told me earlier that his area of expertise was meta-ethics, and so it like made either perfect sense or like no sense at all that when the movie ended, he turned to everyone and was like really earnestly like, did he do the right thing? And he really wanted to talk about it. So, but he was like, so basically he was, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, he's referring to the ending of the movie where Radio Raheem, who's one of the black characters in the film, he is this character that goes around the neighborhood everywhere with his big boombox playing, blasting Public Enemy everywhere he goes. And he gets into a fight with Sal, the owner of the pizzeria. After things escalate, after Buggin' Out, who's the character who was like demanding a boycott, after things escalate and they're in this fight and the cops show up to break things up. And in the process, the cops end up murdering Radio Raheem by putting him in a chokehold. And the cops take away Radio Raheem's body, and at that point, the whole neighborhood has like kind of congregated outside of Sal's shop. And at that point, Mookie, which is Spike Lee's character, decides to take a big trash can and throw it through the window of the shop, which incites the whole crowd to sort of like storm the shop and destroy it and ultimately burn it down. What I love about this scene in particular, as opposed to like the more like sort of like explosive and famous ending, is that it like sets up the stakes for Mookie's decision by kind of showing us how like the crazy kind of arbitrary power and like moral authority that we invest into ownership. Like when Sal's like, $2 for the extra cheese, and we're like, what? Like the slice of pizza is only $1.50. Like there's like definitely something like, you know, else going on than like a purely economic rationale. And like why is Buggin' Out in the wrong when he wants, you know, representation in a shop that's in a black neighborhood that's patronized exclusively by black customers? Like that's like those are very reasonable demands. But these demands are operating in like a kind of like moral economy set up by these racist property relations. And if you don't acknowledge them or you don't obey them, like you're forced out. So that's why Mookie had to destroy the shop in the end. And when the movie's like, or when people are like, did he do the right thing? The movie's actually kind of like, maybe that's like not the right question. At least that's my take, and if anyone disagrees, you can come talk to me later. But now I'd like to introduce our next resentful participant, Rahel Aima. Rahel is a writer and critic based in Brooklyn. She's the special projects editor at The New Inquiry and the former founding editor of The State. She's currently working on a book about color and futurity. Rahel?
Hello. Hey, so I was actually going to read some A.A. Gill, a text that's kind of bothered me for years, but a couple of days ago I came across An Extreme Object of Resentment, which a lot of you might have also encountered. You might have also heard that Refinery 29 is now a participant in the class struggle, and this is the text that appears to have launched their crusade. So this comes from their Money Diaries series, in which they ask millennial women to keep track of their spending for a week. This one comes from a 21-year-old intern. She makes $25 an hour at her marketing internship. Her parents pay for her $21 West Village one-bedroom, which she shares with one roommate who pays $19.50 to live in the den on the other side of a sliding door. Additionally, she receives an $800 allowance, this is all per month, by the way, from her parents, and another $300 from her grandfather, to which she said #blessed. People also include their other monthly expenses. Hers include a $40.76 Brazilian sugaring, $210 on Equinox, $9.95 on MoviePass, and everything else is paid for by her parents. So I'm going to read some excerpts from her week. Any humanity has been edited out in interests of time and also maximum resentment. Day 1, 8:06 a.m. For breakfast, I make my classic avocado toast with feta cheese and a hard-boiled egg. 11:26 a.m. I spend most of my morning working on a small project, online shopping, and journaling. Perk of being an intern is that I don't get too much work assigned in a day, but I do find myself bored occasionally. 1:05 p.m. I sit around and do nothing until my 3 p.m. meeting. I'm sorry, I'm going to have trouble getting through this. 5:01 p.m. I leave every day at 5 on the dot. The company doesn't want interns working late, as it reflects poorly on them. I also get to work from home tomorrow, so it basically feels like Friday. 7 p.m. I spend the rest of my afternoon packing for my Hamptons trip this weekend. My awesome friend always hosts my entire girl squad for weekends out there. Daily total, $15.12. Day 2. 9 a.m. My alarm goes off and I quickly switch on my work laptop to see if I have any emails. Per usual, I do not. 12:15 p.m. I walk over to Equinox for a hot yoga class. I love to exercise before weekend trips. Makes me feel like I'm starting on the right foot. I'm so thankful for the Equinox amenities. They make living on the go so much easier. 2:05 p.m. Before the whole group convenes, I run to Sweet Green to pick up lunch, $11.70. 3:30 p.m. I buy a bottle of rosé and a Gavi de Gavi, $32. 6:09 p.m. We arrive in the Hamptons and hit absolutely no traffic on the way. Pretty amazing for a Friday afternoon. Daily total, $65.22. Day 3, 8:07 a.m. I wake up with no alarm, feeling so well rested. I haven't run in forever, but the idea of trotting along Sag Harbor sounds fantastic. 11:12 a.m. I grew up boating and absolutely love the ocean. On our way to the marina, we pick up food. I get a piece of salmon, a fricas salad, and a cauliflower salad, $22. 6:15 p.m. My French chef, I know, prepares vegan tacos, chicken tacos, and the veggie salad for all of us. Perfect pre-drinking meal. 9:06 p.m. A friend of mine lets me make 4 drinks with her Bacardi, so I Venmo her a little money. 2 Uber XLs are called to get us to the party. My friend splits it with 3 people, not including me. I make a mental note to pay for the car back, $5, that's for the Bacardi. 1:06 a.m., time to go home. I open Uber and see that an XL costs $76, so I freak out. Maybe I'll wait and see if someone else can stomach calling it. 11:11 a.m., I check Lyft, and a big car is only $33. 2 girls in my car play dumb and don't pay me, $12. Daily total, $39. Day 4, 9:15 a.m. We arrive at the bagel shop. I truly feel so nauseous. My friend requests $4 in Venmo for breakfast. $4. 12:22 p.m. Whole group gets hungry, so we go to a local health restaurant for some food. I get a goat cheese and avocado wrap. $23. 8:38 p.m. Dinner is delicious, but the service is terrible and the food is overpriced. The edamame comes out last, and my steamed veggie dumpling appetizer is forgotten. We get individual checks because some of my friends order drinks and some of us got more food. My check is $45.09. I'm in shock, but swallow my pride because #Hamptons prices. $45.09. Daily total, $80.84. Day 5, 12:45 p.m. My morning flies by at work because I get assigned a bunch of tasks. 5:02 p.m. I head to Whole Foods straight from work. $48.24. Daily total, $48.74. Day 6, 11:57 a.m. I snack on half an avocado, and I love how I can just scoop it out with a spoon. 2 p.m. I sneak into the conference room to watch the France versus Belgium soccer game. Happy this will keep me entertained for the afternoon. 3:43 p.m. I snack on cheese and an apple. Now to figure out what to do for the next hour I have at work. I spent most of my day researching podcasts for Living Your Best Life. Daily total, $33.04. Day 7, 9:30 a.m. I get a call from the building cobbler that my shoes are ready for pickup. I am so content with how they turned out. $45.95. 10:58 a.m. I seriously contemplate going around my office asking for work. I'm beyond bored. 12:11 p.m. I take my lunch outside. I also listen to an Oprah podcast and read some of my current book, You Don't Have to Like Me. 1:19 p.m. I receive an assignment. Yippee! Now I can be entertained for the afternoon. 2:03 p.m. Sit in conference room to watch the England versus Croatia game. I have no preference at this point for any team because I'm team #Latin American Soccer. 4:33 p.m. I get assigned a decent amount of work. Why couldn't this have happened hours ago? 5:10 p.m. Finally leave work and go to Equinox for my yoga class. 7:12 p.m. I shower and get ready to grab dinner with my BFF, Zed. We walk to a pizza place in Houston. 7:45 p.m. The waiter tells us it'll be a 5-minute wait. Those 5 minutes pass, and then another 20 minutes pass, and suddenly we've been waiting for 45 minutes. I just want food. 8:42 p.m. We finally sit down at a lovely table outside. Zed and I ordered 2 small pizzas and a grilled calamari appetizer to share. I tell her there's no chance we leave without getting some free stuff. I suggest to the waiter that he brings us some wine in the house, and he does. He also brings us pina colada with our check, $36.62. And we also have a breakdown for her week. Food and drink, $266.23. Entertainment, 0. Home and health, 0. Clothes and beauty, $45.95. Transport, $61.35. Other, 0. And weekly total, $373.53. And that was her week.
So next we have Jennifer Krasinski. Jennifer is a writer, critic, and a senior editor at Artforum. So join me in welcoming Jennifer.
Nice to meet you all. So I, like probably any sane person in this very moment in time, the recurring question in mind is, how did we get here? And this evening, I will be reading Susan Sontag's response to, well, I wrote something because I'm really bad at extemporaneous speaking, as you can tell. So the week after 9/11, The New Yorker turned over its Talk of the Town column to 9 different writers, asking them to respond to the tragedy. And those writers included John Updike, Jonathan Franzen, Dennis Johnson, Roger Angel, Aaron Appelfeld, Rebecca Mead, Susan Sontag, Amitav Ghosh, and Donald Antrim. And you can make of that list what you will in another conversation. So, Most of these pieces were, as one might imagine, written in a state of shock, sadness, and disorientation. They're plaintive, mostly tender, and looking back, mourning not just the victims or the fallen towers, but, in a sort of wincing moment, a loss of American greatness. Again, make of that what you will. So the words they use are largely sensitive, poetic, that is, except for those written by Sontag, who chose not to just air her grievances with American policy, but with what she perceived to be our failing collective American character. So enraged and ferocious, she wrote with brevity and at a sort of point-blank range, a power shot to the American conscience. And she calls out the unwillingness she sees to admit that America had essentially written its own fate. Now, as was the case for Sontag throughout her career, actually, she was roundly criticized, as you can imagine. Those on the right rebuked her as she was not patriotic, and so forth, and so forth. And those on the left exclaimed that she had been insensitive and that these words had been written too soon. So one wonders, listening now, if we'd been able to take the hit, if amends had been made and not revenge, what this world would look like. So this is Susan Sontag, and actually to give you a little bit more context, I'm just going to read the last few sentences of Rebecca Mead's piece, so you can really hear the kaboom of Sontag. So, Rebecca Mead, darkened, gated warehouses looked like warehouses instead of boutiques or day spas. It was possible to remember how Soho was when downtown was still downtown, before the bridge and tunnel crowd started snarling the streets and turning the bookstores into shoe stores, and then to think of the bridges closed and the tunnels empty, and, with some surprise, to wish that the sidewalks were clogged with chattering shoppers, and to wish to heaven they had never gone away. This will make a really good study one day if anyone is looking for a subject. Now, Sontag. The disconnect between last Tuesday's monstrous dose of reality and the self-righteous drivel and outright deceptions being peddled by public figures and TV commentators is startling, depressing. The voices licensed to follow the event seem to have joined together in a campaign to infantilize the public. Where is the acknowledgement that this was not a cowardly attack on civilization or liberty or humanity or the free world, quotes all hers, but an attack on the world's self-proclaimed superpower, undertaken as a consequence of specific American alliances and actions? How many citizens are aware of the ongoing American bombing of Iraq? And if the word cowardly is to be used, it might be more aptly applied to those who kill from beyond the range of retaliation, high in the sky, than those willing to die themselves in order to kill others. In the matter of courage, a morally neutral virtue, whatever may be said of the perpetrators of Tuesday's slaughter, they were not cowards. Our leaders are bent on convincing us that everything is okay. America is not afraid. Our spirit is unbroken. Although this was a day that will live in infamy, and America is now at war. But everything is not okay. And this was not Pearl Harbor. We have a robotic president who assures us that America still stands tall, a wide spectrum of public figures in and out of office who are strongly opposed to the policies being perused abroad by this administration apparently feel free to say nothing more than that they stand united behind President Bush. A lot of thinking needs to be done, and perhaps is being done in Washington and elsewhere, but the ineptitude of American intelligence and counterintelligence about options available to American foreign policy, particularly in the Middle East, and about what constitutes a smart program of military defense, but the public is not being asked to bear much of the burden of reality. The unanimously applauded self-congratulatory bromides of a Soviet Party Congress seem contemptible. The unanimity of the sanctimonious, reality-concealing rhetoric spouted by American officials and media commentators in recent days seems, well, unworthy of a mature democracy. Those in public office have let us know that they consider their task to be a manipulative one. Confidence building and grief management. Politics, the politics of a democracy, which entails disagreement, which promotes candor, has been replaced by psychotherapy. Let's by all means grieve together, but let's not be stupid together. A few shreds of historical awareness might help us understand what has just happened and what may continue to happen. Our country is strong, we are told over and over again. I, for one, don't find this entirely consoling. Who doubts that America is strong? But that's not all America has to be.
Next up, we have Marwa Halal. Marwa is a poet and journalist. Her work has appeared in Apogee, Hyperallergic, Poets and Writers, and elsewhere. She's the author of I Am Made to Leave, I Am Made to Return, and Invasive Species. Halal is the winner of BOM's 2016 poetry contest and has been awarded fellowships from Poets House, Brooklyn Poets, and Cave Canem. She has presented her work at the Museum of Modern Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and the Brooklyn Museum. Born in Al Mansour, Egypt, Halal currently lives in Brooklyn.
A list of resentments in no particular order. That a friend of mine has been in communication with her professor over a grade grievance since the end of last semester. That the white professor has given her the option of doing extra work in exchange for an increase of letter grade A. That my friend is Black, African, and speaks with an accent no doubt lent to the professor's bias. That my friend has knowledge that her white classmates all got A's. That these white classmates did not participate as much in class, are not award-winning writers, and are intellectually less superior. In short, they are mediocre. White students passing with their whiteness. That we always have to work harder. How tiring, because you have heard this all before. That I had the exact same grievances with white male professors in both high school and grad school. That it wasn't that they didn't know how to do math, but that they were racist or biased or both. That the grad school one is now listed as one of the donors in the back of my first full-length book is funny to me. That grades don't really matter, but principles do. That lust is a form of emotional honesty that leads to a great deal of dishonesty. That you don't pay attention. That you don't pay attention. That you don't pay attention. You aren't listening. You aren't listening. You aren't seeing. The irreconcilable fact of my migration, that I never wanted to be here, doing this. Overhearing a white woman ask another reader/artist if she realized the invitation to partake in tonight's event was an insult. My co-presenter's matriarch would say, bless her, bless her. That this woman is most likely looking at her phone right now. That you will applaud now. And now, Harriet Mullen from Sleeping with the Dictionary. Denigration. Did we surprise our teachers who had niggling doubts about the pickaninny brains of small Black children, who reminded them of clean pickaninnies on a box of laundry soap? How muddy is the Mississippi compared to the third longest river of the darkest continent? In the land of the Igbo, the Hausa, and the Yoruba, what is the price per barrel of nigrescence? Those slaves who were wealth survived on niggardly provisions. Should inheritors of wealth fault the poor enigma for lacking a dictionary? Does the mayor demand a recount of every bullet, or does City Hall simply neglect the Black Alderman's district? If I disagree with your beliefs, do you chalk it up to my negligible powers of discrimination? Supposing I'm just trifling and not worth considering, does my niggling concern with trivial matters negate my ability to negotiate in good faith? Though Maroons, who were unruly Africans, not loose horses or lazy sailors, were called renegades in Spanish, will I turn any blacker if I renege on this deal? Elliptical. They just can't seem to. They should try harder to. They ought to be more. We all wish they weren't so. They never. They always. Sometimes they. Once in a while they. However, it is obvious that their overall tendency has been, the consequences of which have been, they don't appear to understand that. If only they would make an effort to, but we know how difficult it is for them to. Many of them remain aware of. Some who should know better simply refuse to. Of course, their perspective has been limited by. On the other hand, they obviously feel entitled to. Certainly, we can't forget that they, nor can it be denied that they, we know that this has had an enormous impact on their. Nevertheless, their behavior strikes us as. Our interactions, unfortunately, have been. We are not responsible. We are not responsible for your lost or stolen relatives. We cannot guarantee your safety if you disobey our instructions. We do not endorse the causes or claims of people begging for handouts. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Your ticket does not guarantee that we will honor your reservations. In order to facilitate our procedures, please limit your carrying on. Before taking off, please extinguish all smoldering resentments. If you cannot understand English, you will be moved out of the way. In the event of a loss, you'd better look out for yourself. Your insurance was canceled because we can no longer handle your frightful claims. Our handlers lost your luggage and we are unable to find the key to your legal case. We were detained for interrogation because you fit the profile. You are not presumed to be innocent if the police have reason to suspect you are carrying a concealed wallet. It's not our fault you were born wearing a gang color. It is not our obligation to inform you of your rights. Step aside, please, while our officer inspects your bad attitude. You have no rights that we are bound to respect. Please remain calm, or we can't be held responsible for what happens to you.
So next we have Sarah Resnick. Sarah is published in N+1, Book Forum, Art in America, Bomb, and Triple Canopy, where she was previously an editor. Her writing was selected for 2017's Best American Essays and for the 2019 Pushcart Prize. She lives in New York. Please join me in welcoming Sarah.
Hello. I'm going to be reading from a novel. I think I'm the only person tonight who's doing that. This is going to be a representation of, I suppose, a more personal kind of resentment, something that I imagine many of us can relate to. Maybe that some of us spend a lot of time and perhaps money trying to deal with, and that is the resentment toward our parents. Woo! So I'm going to be reading from a novel by a woman named Anne Quinn. This is what she looks like. The novel is called Berg. Anne is considered an experimental novelist. She's British. She was born in 1936 in Brighton, Sussex, which is important because this novel is actually set in a seaside town, just like Brighton. So the novel came out in 1964, and actually Quinn would go on to publish 3 more novels until her very early death in 1973. She drowned, and many of her friends and family members consider this to have been a suicide. So Quinn actually did not really think of herself as a experimental novelist, but as you'll sort of glean from this excerpt that I'm going to read, she really did have a concern for the technical possibilities of the novel, and was interested in a kind of articulation of human experience, of consciousness. So the novel kind of attempts to capture this fleeting and subterranean movements of her characters' minds and feelings. And I think the novel can be read as autobiographical in its emotional impulses, likely not in its particular details, but Quinn's father was absent as a child. He left when she was quite young, and she ended up inventing a fantasy life about him. And as you'll see, the situation appears in the novel. So Berg tells the story of this broken, bedraggled man, so the genders are reversed here, called Berg. And Berg goes to a seaside resort with the intention of finding and killing his father. A father who had abandoned his mother when Berg was still a baby. So Berg manages to find a room in the same boarding house where his father is now living with this woman named Judith. But whenever the opportunity arises for Berg to take action, to do the deed, he doesn't do it. He procrastinates. And instead he displaces his patricidal intent onto a number of other things, including a cat, his father's budgie, and also his father's ventriloquist dummy. As you'll see, the prose has a very surrealist quality, which kind of contributes to the novel's black humor, but also really conveys the strange world that Berg's consciousness creates for itself, and creates this kind of impression that the shape of the narrative and movement of language are dictated by movements of Berg's own mind. The writing mixes first-person and third-person descriptions, which I think in the section I'm reading you'll see that, of Berg's experiences with words that sometimes can be attributed to other characters in the novels, but these are not really set off as dialogue. So my kind of hopeful interpretation of this, if there is one, is that if the novel is indeed understood to have been influenced by Quinn's own experiences, then her resentment can be understood as a powerful medium, not only for self-exploration, but for self-reconstruction. Her writing project is concerned with related questions of sexual, linguistic, and narrative identity. The sun streamed in upon the wigs, which, like clumps of seaweed, were spread about, the bottles already thick with dust. Oh, I should mention, Berg is a wig salesman. Of all things. Berg slowly dressed, each item of soiled clothing chainmailing his limbs, part by part, until at last his head sprouted out, a hedgehog with eyes that darted from left to right. Alistair Berg, alias Greb, that's Berg pronounced backwards, by the way, commercial traveler, seller of wigs, hair tonic, paranoid paramour, do you plead guilty? Yes. Guilty of all things the human condition brings. Guilty of being too committed. Guilty of defending myself, of defrauding others. Guilty of love, loving too much or not enough. Guilty of parochial actions, of universal wish fulfillments, of conscious martyrdom, of unconscious masochism, idle hours, fingers that meddle. Alistair Charles Humphrey Greb, alias Berg, you are condemned to life imprisonment until such time you may prove yourself worthy of death. Maybe before, yes, definitely before entering this place, perhaps even prior to that fateful day when seeing the photograph of the old man, it had started, the stirring of the insect between throat and heart. But what precisely are you proposing to do now? Yes, you, a pauper, who will soon be living off the national assistance, digging purple toes into a threadbare rug, eyes avoiding the streaks of grease round the gas ring, the dust on the bottles, the chest of drawers, the cracked enamel pot, the crack that runs from one corner to another, where the wallpaper ends in a map of Italy. Did these surroundings add up to anything? Had they a separate existence? Say I decided to leave, would they mean nothing, absolutely nothing? If I could completely wipe out the man of yesterday, what did others do to eradicate the past? But then he had hardly been on intimate enough terms with anyone to know what they might or might not do in a similar situation. Besides, hadn't he always taken others, himself, for granted, creatures of habit, chained to environment, hereditary complaints and complexes? Had the convolution he was now in merely been transferred, destined to rotate the same way? He sat by the window, the sun now hidden by fistfuls of clouds. I relate myself to that, the dismembered trees, half-broken walls, roofs with slates ready to fall off, and the people below with their masks of indifference, and I am aware of an urge to break through them all. Yet how much easier it would be to carry out orders from a hierarchy. Opposite a poster where the lettering has been broken up into spittle on the board, Christ died for your sins. Isn't it enough to save myself? He pulled the curtains together, shutting away the drizzle that now drifted over the town. Of course, that is what is always so unforgivable, the fact that everything will go on with or without my existence. If one could only have all, like Faust, just for one brief moment of absolute belief, and let whatever happens afterwards take care of itself. A voyage, presumably, that would take one beyond the precincts of an affluent society. The pipe dream of a disenchanted age. He felt the reptile creases in his neck, the sweat running over cracks in his collar. But he almost welcomed this, for he was once more being carried on a huge cloud toward a rainbow he had promised himself. Naturally enough, he had been allowing himself time to think the matter carefully over. That was the explanation. Well, then now everything had been fixed. Tomorrow would see an end to it once and for all. He made some tea, brooding over the tea leaves, finally scooping 4 out, which he shuffled about, squashed them against the side of the cup. Damn, of course, in all this, he had completely forgotten to send his usual weekly letter to Edith. That's his mother, by the way. That would mean telegrams, urgent trunk calls, or even her turning up if he didn't write at once. He found a pen, but no ink. Would it be wise asking Judith for some? It would mean facing her questionings, perhaps an outburst of tears, a general demonstration against him, all mankind. He searched the chest of drawers and found a pencil. Dear Mum, how are you? Everything here is fine. I've seen my father, but so far haven't revealed who I really am. How Dickensian can one get? And what can I really put? That he's been fucking another woman next door, and probably a dozen others besides over the past 15 years, is about to go on some tour with some friend in a vaudeville show, trailing a dummy around, that he's in love with a budgie. Somehow I think you're better off without him. He sees a bit the worse for wear, not at all like the photograph, or even like the ones you already have of him, and he still hasn't any money. As far as I can make out, he's sponging left, right, and center. Thanks for the food parcel and the new set of underclothes, which, as you know, I appreciate very much. If you could see your if you could see your way to sending a few quid, it would help until I get straightened out. Sales have been somewhat tricky here, but I hope to fix up something by the end of the month. Well, that's all for now. I think of you always. Still, it won't be long now before Christmas. Then we can have a nice get-together. Meanwhile, well, I'm going to fuck her too. He sucked the top of the pencil, a wet brown fang, and pushed his finger through the paper. How can I ever identify myself as such a person as she accepts? He pushed his fist right through and leaned against the partition. If I turned, perhaps the whole structure inside would rattle like a box of nails. But I'm damned if I'll allow the old bastard to get away with it, with the past. I, the son, have every justification. People will sympathize, might even be considered a hero. Who's to stop, denounce, or condemn me anyway? The biggest reality lies in myself. He drew a circle in the mirror and wrote, non omnis moriar, which means I will almost die, or I will not fully die. Sorry.
Next up, we have Wo Chan. Wo Chan is a queer poet and drag performer. They are the author of the chapbook Order the World, Mom, published by Belladonna, and have received honors from the New York Foundation of the Arts, Kundiman, Lambda Literary, and the Asian American Writers Workshop. As a standing member of the Brooklyn-based drag/burlesque collective Switch and Play, they have performed at venues including MoMA PS1, Joe's Pub, National Sawdust, New York Live Arts, and Bam Fisher. Wo was born in Macau, China, and currently lives in New York, where they are an MFA candidate in poetry at NYU.
I have the feeling that I misunderstood the assignment. Okay. Do I look good in your grandmother's clothing? Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, I have to do this thing that drag queens do. Go get a drink at the bar if you want, tip your bartender. No, seriously though, if you want more, just like go and get some. I'm gonna be talking for just a little bit. Nothing is more boring than like a drag queen talking about her own drag. But I want to contextualize what I'm about to show you all and like where it came from. So my name is Wo Chan. I'm 26. I'm a poet. I'm a drag performer. I started doing drag when I was 20, which was also the same time that my mother, father, and I were served deportation papers. The year before, we had lost our citizenships because of essentially, how do I frame this? Essentially like a mid-level supervisor scandal, basically. And so they went after everyone whose citizenships were approved by this person. So 240 Asian Americans lost their citizenships back in 2012 or so. And we had like a long 5-year fight, which is lucky, right? Like in a legal battle, and I guess when you're trying to in like immigration battles, the longer it goes, it's like the luckier it is if you can stay it out. And that's all. It's always like a thing of like, how much resource do you have? How much time do you have? So I spent my early 20s living at the behest of my attorney. She says, you have to live, you have to keep going to school, you have to do all these things, it's gonna take forever. But also in the back of my mind and in the back of my spirit, just knowing that this life that I was building, I might not be able to stay in, right? And it was just like crazy parallel offshoots. Fortunately, we're still here. Make of that what you will. I know you can clap. Thank you. I only had a little to do with it, actually. No, I had to be very responsible for it. Like, I don't have a great relationship with my family, but I was like, okay, mom and dad, like, we have to do this. Like, let's hire someone, let's take this seriously. Anyways, so while all this was happening, I found poetry very difficult to write about this subject specifically, but I had drag, and drag is very immediate. I could go onto a stage, and people could get what they could get out of it, clap. I could, I don't know, maybe in some way feel that my life was valid, and so this is like a response to the idea of experience and documents, and I don't know, you defined resentment partially about the inability to speak back against a terrible power, right? And I feel that that dynamic was exactly what was happening to me. So thank you all so much. I have friends from high school here, which is so good. No, okay, we can play it. I don't know what to do with this.
That's where you'll find me.
So next up is Devin Kenny. Devin Kenny is an artist working across mediums, living in Houston. Born in 1987 and online since childhood, he has witnessed the shift from Web 1.0 into the social internet of Web 2.0 and today's paradigm. His work is colored by this transition. Using sculpture, video, photography, text, performance, music, and painting, this practice engages questions of identity construction and the aesthetics developed in networks, from quilt codes allegedly used on the Underground Railroad to memes and viral media. Raised on the south side of Chicago, he relocated to New York to begin his studies at Cooper Union. He has since continued his practice through the Bruce High Quality Foundation University, Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, SOMA Mexico, the Whitney ISP, and MFAH Core, doing performances at art and music venues in NYC, Chicago, Los Angeles, and internationally, including Bikini Wax, Art Space Auckland, Red Cat, MoMA PS1, Julia Stoshek Collection, The Glue Factory, and more. So please join me in welcoming Devin.
You want to use this one? No, this is cool. Thank you. All right. I kind of had to dig deep on this one because I have I don't have a really good relationship with resentment. So there's some foul language and there's pop culture references in this, so just be forewarned. I had trouble considering resentment at first because, unlike anger or annoyance, which can become a catalyst, goading an action resulting in constructive and positive change, resentment is something that's carried or harbored. It's the anger that festers, stewing from a babbling pool of reflection eternal, the intra-barbershop hatred that seems like it can't be challenged, the rocking chair creak and grumble, the card table straight face made when the muscles refuse to contort into legible form anymore. An imagined black proximity to rage and id has been fuel for the death of many innocents and inspiration for much media. After slavery's end, when righteous black anger gets actualized again, it became policies that usually serve communities much larger than initially intended and gets treated as generative by critical history when acknowledged. Black rage has also been drawn upon to be made into an easily understood and consumed entertainment on one hand, and deep, nuanced material upon which one can build an academic, literary, or other career on the other hand. To me, resentment felt like the stuff that can't get out, that slowly poisons you, that adheres like a sludge. It seems like the worst of both worlds. Immediately, the comedy cliche, "Hey, I resemble that remark," came to mind. I thought it was Daffy Duck, but it wasn't. It was Foghorn Leghorn, a character who himself is based on the Dixiecrat from Radioland, Senator Claghorn, drizzled in anti-blackness. "Pay attention, boy. That's a joke, son." Oh yeah, there's a lot of examples of this used in the Merry Melodies, but I chose Space Jam because, yeah.
Well, remember the tiny aliens I told you about?
Oh. You heard of the Dream Team? Well, we're the Mean Team, Wussy Man. Wussy Man.
Wussy Man? We're the Monstars. M-O-N...
Let's see what you got, chump.
I don't play basketball anymore.
I don't play basketball anymore.
Maybe you're chicken. I say I resemble that remark.
You calling me chicken?
But this joke had even earlier origins.
Sorry, lady, we thought you were a burglar.
Yes, we are that, yes. Wolf! Wolf! Ah! Oh, me? I resemble that remark.
I always said your face scares people. Why don't you throw it away?
One chooses to say they resemble the remark rather than resent it, taking ownership, self-possessing, being rubber and making their assailant glue. Many aspects of appearance can be changed, even internal appearances. I thought about reading for filth. Does one's hand stay clean? I thought about Dave Chappelle's Clayton Bigsby, a blind black KKK member. It's not clear if the humor is ableist. It's not clear if the humor is only ableist, or if the real joke is that we can't tell if he's self-hating or just doing a really good embodiment of a white supremacist. Is Clayton Bigsby the bizarro of Navin R. Johnson, the white guy who thinks he's black, the protagonist of The Jerk? Or is it closer to David Dunn and Mr. Glass from M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable? I started thinking of expressions of resentment in culture that gave me something. The phantasmagoric pettiness of Rhetoric Ramirez, Washington Heights-born, LA-raised Dominican-American rapper, a psychedelic hurt growing from long suffering, the perfect counter to bus drivers' sly, Paul Beatty-esque sarcasm, fighting firebombs with firebombs, though clearly the powers that be have a bigger supply, and a few have already exploded in your hand from holding them too long. This is a clip.
Shout and get crunk at your grandmother's house doing nothing.
Go back to Compton, you dirty nigger. We don't sell watermelons here, is what I yell at the white folks on the way to the gun show once a year. Nigga, some of my best friends are white and I love mud sharks just the same, except for the ones that come from Africa and got Johnson for a last name. Darth Vader, Rhetoric, Earl Jones, James, by the way. What's another name for shit colored in German? Take a guess. Melanin, you illiterate, knuckle-dragging ethnic beast, 2/5 of a person, civil servant, welfare undeserving, never own a suburban home. I hope they raise the rent so high the crack money you make couldn't buy you gutter property curbside. In the game of Monopoly, you would advance to rub.
Not
Or you high desert pitch white mad cause your corn-fed pig wife gave you penis envy over the pony in the barn. Fuck you and the horse you rode in on. Bestiality porn, don't watch it. Defecation porn, don't watch it. Shit-faced drunk from cow tipping last night. Your version of crackery is reminiscing on an umbilical cord before you had to pay for the rock and hit the glass pipe. Yeah, let's talk about civil rights. A six plate from the chop shop put together wrong. If ever there was a Mexican transformer, he would be a lowrider named Wetback Tron. Con artist hit the stopwatch and let's play a barbed wire game of turntable hopscotch in the form of a...
There's something I want to tell ya. It's been eating me from inside out. Let's make it a point to get together sometime soon, and we'll talk. Come close enough so I can whisper. I've been meaning to tell you that. Oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind. And there's another angle on resentment, this time from spoken word poet and rap pioneer Gil Scott-Heron. Home is Where the Hatred is a song about dealing with addiction as well as surviving a world that doesn't want to see you thrive. A particular kind of trauma only multiplied the further away from able-bodied, cisgendered, heterosexual white maleness you get. Esther Phillips's cover exemplifies it with an additional layer of strategic smooth sweetness.
Junkie walking through the twilight. I'm on my way home. I left 3 days ago, but no one seems to know I'm gone. Home is where the hatred is. Home is filled with pain, and it may not be such a bad idea if it never went home again. Stand as far away from me as you can and ask me why. Hang on to your rosary beads, close your eyes and watch me die. You keep saying, kick it, quit it, Lord, but did you ever try to turn your sick soul inside out so that the world can watch you die?
Finally, Gil Scott-Heron's Whitey on the Moon has a kind of for-us bias trajectory to combat the feeling of resignation when you know you can't really send your bills to NASA. J'accuse au fait.
We have a poem here. It's called Whitey on the Moon.
And it was inspired by some whiteys on the moon. So I want to give credit where credit is due. All right. That's it. A rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay no doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon. You know, the man just upped my rent last night, cause Whitey's on the moon. No hot water, no toilets, no lights, but Whitey's on the moon. I wonder why he's upping me, cause Whitey's on the moon? Well, I was already giving him $50 a week, and now Whitey's on the moon. Taxes taking my whole damn check. The junkies make me a nervous wreck. The price of food is going up, and as if all that crap wasn't enough, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. Was all that money I made last year for Whitey on the moon? How come I ain't got no money here? Whitey's on the moon. You know, I just about had my fill of Whitey on the moon. I think I'll send these doctor bills, air mail special. To Whitey on the moon.
Resentment will never get me out of the shit. But when approached right, it can let me know about muscles I didn't know I had. It's an individual practice.
Okay, that's it for show and tell. Thank you all so much again for coming.
Thank
Hang
you.
out, get a drink.
Get a drink. Thanks again to everyone. Rahel, Sarah, Jennifer, Wo, Marwa. Give one more round of applause.
And thanks so much, obviously, to all of our presenters.